Snooker is a game of skill and strategy, but not every player has relied on talent alone. Behind the scenes, some took a different route, fixing matches, making secret deals, and risking everything for a quick payday. Some got away with it for a while, others weren't so lucky. Over the years, some players thought they could outsmart the system, but when the truth came out, the consequences were brutal. From shocking exposés to career-ending bans, these masterminds turned the game into something far bigger than just potting balls. Let's dive into the most infamous match-fixing scandals that rocked the snooker world. Let's start with the undisputed king of snooker scandals, Stephen Lee, a player who had the skill, the composure, and unfortunately, the audacity to turn match-fixing into what looked suspiciously like a side hustle. Between 2008 and 2009, he was caught fixing not one, not two, but 7 matches across various tournaments, including the Malta Cup, the UK Championship, and the Masters. When the authorities finally pieced it all together, the evidence was airtight. Phone records, betting patterns, and bank transactions all pointed to the same conclusion that Lee had been throwing matches for cash. The WPBSA wasted no time dropping the hammer and handed him a brutal 12-year ban in 2013. To put that into perspective, that's longer than some entire snooker careers. Lee tried to appeal, but with so much evidence against him, there was no way out. If Lee's scandal was a full-blown crime saga, John Higgins's controversy was more of a plot twist that nobody saw coming. Higgins, a 4-time world champion and one of snooker's most respected players, found himself in boiling hot water in 2010 when an undercover sting operation by News of the World exposed him discussing match-fixing. The setup was a meeting in Ukraine, where Higgins and his manager, Pat Mooney, were caught on camera allegedly agreeing to lose frames in non-ranking tournaments for a hefty payout of £261,000. Now, Higgins insisted he only played along out of fear and never actually intended to follow through. But the damage was done. The video was out there and the headlines wrote themselves. While he managed to dodge a career-ending punishment, Higgins still got hit with a 6-month suspension and a £75,000 fine. A career that was once untouchable now had a permanent stain, and though he returned to the circuit, the whispers never fully faded. But when it comes to snooker's wildest scandals, few players can match Quinten Hann's chaotic career. He was talented, no doubt about that, but his attitude, let's just say he was making headlines for all the wrong reasons. Things took a dark turn in 2005 when The Sun dropped a bombshell. Hann had allegedly accepted a bribe to throw his China Open match against Ken Doherty. And this wasn't just some shady rumor. Undercover journalists had the tapes to prove it, catching Hann casually discussing match-fixing like he was ordering a coffee. When the WPBSA launched an investigation, the evidence stacked up faster than a perfect break. Realizing he was in deep trouble, Hann pulled out of the Grand Prix and UK Championship, citing medical and personal reasons. But the damage was done already. He was slapped with an 8-year ban, effectively ending his snooker career. Not that it mattered much to him because instead of fighting to clear his name, Hann decided to pivot to professional boxing. Then there's Jogia, who compared to Hann and Lee might seem like a small fish in the scandal pool, but make no mistake, he got caught playing a risky game. In 2012, suspicious betting patterns on his match against Matthew Selt triggered an investigation. Turns out, Jogia had been in frequent contact with gamblers who placed heavy bets on him losing. Just a coincidence? The WPBSA didn't think so. Jogia denied any wrongdoing, but the evidence spoke louder. The punishment was a 2-year ban and a £2,000 fine. Not as extreme as Lee's, but enough to put a serious dent in his career. Unlike some of the other names on this list, Jogia never really found his way back. And then there's Peter Francisco, a player whose name might not ring as many bells today, but back in 1995 he was at the center of one of snooker's most suspicious moments. He lost 10-2 to Jimmy White in the first round of the World Championship, a result that raised more than a few eyebrows. And the reason was unusual betting activity. Large sums of money had been placed on that exact scoreline, and Francisco was the common link. The WPBSA launched an investigation, and while there wasn't enough evidence to prove full-blown match-fixing, there was enough to hand him a 5-year ban. That was pretty much the end of the road for his snooker career. After that, his name slowly faded into the background. And yet, that's not the end of it. More recently, Chinese players have found themselves at the center of match-fixing controversies, shaking the sport to its core once again. In 2023, the snooker world was rocked by the biggest match-fixing scandal in its history. The investigation began when irregular betting patterns were flagged in multiple matches involving Chinese players. The WPBSA wasted no time launching an inquiry, and as evidence piled up, the truth became impossible to ignore. Several top players were involved in rigging matches for financial gain. One of the biggest names caught in the scandal was 2021 Masters champion Yan Bingtao, a player once hailed as the future of snooker. Authorities discovered that he had manipulated matches, with betting syndicates profiting from the outcomes. His involvement led to a 7.5-year ban, derailing what could have been a legendary career. Then there was Lu Ning, another rising star whose journey took a nosedive. Investigators found that he had been involved in match-fixing schemes dating back several years. Like Yan, Lu received a lengthy suspension, ensuring that his promising career came to an abrupt halt. But the scandal didn't end with just suspensions. 2 players received the harshest punishment possible: lifetime bans. Li Hang and Liang Wenbo were found to be not only fixing their own matches, but also pressuring younger players to do the same. Their involvement was so deep that authorities had no choice but to remove them from the sport permanently. The investigation left no stone unturned. Undercover recordings, suspicious betting patterns, and testimonies from fellow players all pointed to the same conclusion: that snooker had been infiltrated by corruption, and it ran deep. The WPBSA acted fast, sending a clear message. No matter how talented or famous a player is, match-fixing would never be tolerated. This scandal was a brutal wake-up call for the snooker world. It highlighted the growing influence of illegal betting syndicates and the vulnerability of young players to financial temptation. With China being a major powerhouse in snooker, this controversy was a global crisis for the sport. Snooker may have cleaned house for now, but history has shown that when there's money to be made, corruption often follows. The question remains: how long before the next scandal hits? And that's a wrap on the biggest snooker scandals of all time. If you enjoyed this, then don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next wild story from the world of sports.